I think this Vikings team is legit. Lamar being able to run and Derrick Henry being their lead running back, this feels like a team that should be able to run out the clock at the end and just like do that painful thing when you're on the opposing team and you're watching the other team march down the field for 9 minutes in the fourth and you're behind by a touchdown. Watch that for Dallas, because if he improves, this Dallas team will improve. Gonna celebrate and pop some champagne because the Phillies are winning the division for the first time since I think 2011, and I was just going to be so excited, but no, they lost the 4-game series to the Mets because the Phillies couldn't hit, because Bryce Harper couldn't hit Mets pitching.
Recording from New York and Los Angeles, your hosts, Nicole Katz and Brianna Klein, are emerging from the tunnel for this week's show. Another sports show is ready to broadcast to you on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Make us one of your stars of the game by subscribing, liking the video, and turning on auto downloads. Before we kick off, please leave us a podcast review and YouTube comment. Attend the postgame on social media for exclusive daily content. Today on another sports show.
I am without Nicole this week. She is feeling sick and not so great today. So I'm going to do the best I can with a solo version of another sports show. I run through some of the biggest headlines of this week in the NFL. We talk about Carolina benching Bryce Young and winning a game with an Andy Dalton who looks incredible. Speaking of quarterbacks that we didn't think would be incredible but are, we talk about Minnesota and their win over the Houston Texans. And I think at this point, they might actually be good. So I break down that game and what this means for the Minnesota Vikings going forward. Last but definitely not least, we have to circle back to our game of the week from Friday Football Forecast and talk about what is wrong with the Cowboys, but also equally, if we just look at the fourth quarter, what is wrong with the Baltimore Ravens. Then I give you my raw reaction to that Phillies-Mets series and the fact that the Phillies, as of recording this, still have not clinched the division, even though that gem of the game Willer put up. So I get raw and give you all my feelings about Phillies-Mets and my genuine fear for facing them in the playoffs. And then we do MLB Series of the Week. I break down the wild card duel, Mets versus Braves, for the first half of the week. And then we have a series in the second half of the week, Padres Diamondbacks, which is likely going to be a first round matchup as well. The WNBA playoffs are here. And while we haven't discussed a ton of the WNBA playoffs on another sports show so far, I'm excited to give you my top 3 storylines to follow heading into the playoffs. And last but definitely not least, NHL training camp and preseason is here. And because Nicole is not here, I nerd out to you all about Michkov and the Flyers and basically 2 niche storylines about the Flyers. But if you like watching me be like a crazy fan, that segment's also for you. And your gritty moment of the week, because what is the world without gritty? Sadness. So we gotta give you a little gritty every week. And of course, we end the show with the final Webster. All the stories that we couldn't quite fit into the show this week that we think you should know about. Take it away, voiceover man.
It's another sports show, but it's not Monday morning, Tuesday, NFL Overreaction.
With the NFL this week, we shockingly have to start in Carolina. Because while a ton happened this week, Carolina won a game. And that feels like it should be top of the show newsworthy. Now, because of when our shows fell last week and when this news came down, we didn't get to talk in depth about the benching of Bryce Young. So I'm going to put a pin in that and circle back because I want to start with this game in particular. Now, this was our doormat game of the week, if you listen to Friday Football Forecast, because I don't think either of these teams were good. It was in that game because I thought the Panthers had a chance to win this week, but admittedly that chance was slim, and I believe the line ended at about 6.5 points for the Raiders on whatever your betting set of choices. And that felt right. But the Panthers winning 36-22 should be shocking, and it is. Don't misunderstand this. It's shocking, but the worst teams in the NFL still win 3 to 4 games a season. And if you look at the Panthers' schedule, this felt like one of those games that could sneak out a win. Andy Dalton went 26 for 37 for 319 yards. He had 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. That's the big thing. He was only sacked twice for a total of 13 yards. And then Hubbard had 21 carries for 114 yards, which wasn't incredibly efficient, but it did the job. Like, they were playing the Las Vegas Raiders, who, despite winning in week 2, I don't think anyone was fooling themselves that this team was really good. So, yeah, wow, Carolina actually won a game. They were not going to go 0-17 this year. But I want to circle back to the benching of Bryce Young, because if you look at all of this surface level, you would expect, okay, they benched him. Andy Dalton clearly looked like the better quarterback. And I don't think Andy Dalton wasn't starting because he wasn't the better quarterback. I think he was always the better quarterback option, always looked like the better quarterback option in training camp. If you are going to start your number 1 overall pick in his entire rookie season, and this is the figure it out year, I firmly believe you can't bench him after 2 games in the figure it out year. Listening to him in that week 2 press conference was it broke my heart, admittedly, because this is a quarterback that doesn't seem like they were fully backing, and they were putting him in an unfair situation. I will link to it if I remember, but Alex Smith gave a fantastic quote, like series of quotes this week, talking about how quarterbacks are not developed anymore. And not to sound like a back in my day, but like a little back in my day about it, where very few quarterbacks, particularly in the way that college is played now, can just come into the NFL and make it work. If you are the type of football watcher who you really don't watch a lot of college, I would recommend sit down, watch a couple games straight through. You'll notice that the defense just is not the same. You can get away with a lot. And in the NFL, even the worst team in the league, Carolina, which I still think is undisputably right now the worst possible team in the league, can eke out a win. I'm not trying to get on this high horse and proclaim that Bryce Young would definitely be a good quarterback, but I think we have all seen enough examples of Jets' top picks go to other teams now later in their careers and be successful good quarterbacks to know that throwing these rookie quarterbacks into bad situations and not backing and supporting them is definitely going to mean that it guarantees that Bryce Young isn't going to work out. That's where I'm coming down on this. We've seen Geno have a late resurgence. Look at what is going on with Sam Darnold in Minnesota, and we're going to get to that in a moment. Both of these quarterbacks were written off in the league, said no, they couldn't work because they were high draft picks thrown into a bad New York Jets situation. And look at them now. The solution isn't don't play your rookie quarterbacks. The solution is recalibrate your expectations and understand that it could take up to 3 years for your rookie quarterback to get it together. And you need to support him and back him up properly in that time to get that full development out of him. All right, let's pull that pin out of Minnesota and talk about whether or not Minnesota is a real team. We'll talk about this week first. The Vikings walloped the Houston Texans. Now, if you've been listening to every week of another sports show, you'll know that I'm pretty skeptical on Houston Texans overall. And this is just because I think a sophomore slump for a CJ Stroud is to be expected. There were high Super Bowl aspirations for this team coming into this year, and that felt difficult, particularly if you dig back into CJ Stroud's numbers, where he was good last year, but good for a rookie. Well, he was great last year for a rookie. I think he was good to average for an NFL quarterback. So everyone was just expecting that he would make a step up. And this was one of those games where you could just tell that he was still young. 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, 20 for 31, which wasn't bad. In the end, he was sacked a lot. He made a lot of mistakes. And that's going to happen because he's still young. It didn't help that they couldn't get anything going in the run game, which is why I think that, while maybe the Houston Texans aren't Super Bowl bound, they're still a good team. And I think this Minnesota Vikings team is legit because I think their defense and their offensive lines are legit. I think the story in their first game of the season, they beat the Giants, who aren't supposed to be a good team. And it's like, oh, okay, this might be a good Minnesota Vikings team. Week 2, they beat the 49ers. And this was a 49ers team that, well, without Christian McCaffrey, so this one was a 49ers team that was without Christian McCaffrey. So you could talk yourself into, oh, maybe Minnesota's not that good. I can't do that anymore because the Minnesota Vikings won this game 34-7 with Sam Darnold having a mediocre, okay day. Just throwing some stats. He was only 17 for 28 in the passing game for 181 yards. He did score 4 touchdowns. He did throw 4 touchdowns. But he was sacked 4 times. His QBR, no matter how you feel about that stat, was 74.6. And I would say that Houston held Justin Jefferson to the most pedestrian Justin Jefferson we've seen this season so far, with only 6 receptions for 81 yards, which again is crazy to say. It's crazy to say that that's a pedestrian, not a world-beating Justin Jefferson game. But the final score is like, oh my goodness. And despite all this, Sam Darnold fumbled the ball. So how can I look at this game and say, wow, they walloped what we all think is a good Houston Texans team on a mediocre to bad Sam Darnold day? I think this Vikings team is legit. And I would be remiss not to mention Grenard's 3-sack day. Whoa. I'm currently in a place where I think Minnesota is going to compete for the division. They feel firmly, at this point in the year, a team might slot into a wildcard spot. And depending on how long Jordan Love's out and what he looks like when he gets back, this is a team that seems like it should be competing for the division. Because it's now won 2 of, if you looked at their schedules, the auto losses coming into the season based on how everyone thought the Vikings were going to perform. Our game of the week from Friday Football Forecast was Ravens at Cowboys. And in all of the analysis, Nicole felt very strongly that the Ravens were going to win this game. And props to her. I wish she was here and I could tell her in person. Because it looked like all game, like this was going to be an easy win for her. And then I proceeded to spend the rest of the segment defending her pick, but saying that I was going to pick the Cowboys because it would be shocking to me if the Cowboys lost. And if it wasn't for a 19-point fourth quarter comeback, it would have been an embarrassing second week for the Cowboys, losing at home again in embarrassing fashion. So I want to rewind before that fourth quarter and talk about what in the world is wrong with this Cowboys team right now. Dak just doesn't look efficient. And I can't figure out if this is poor play calling, but it seems like he's missing easy dinks and dunks that Dak tends to make. But I'm not a big, let's put this all on the Cowboys, because it seems like this retooled offensive line that coming into the season, everyone felt like the rookie was just going to step up and slot in perfectly. And they lost some people in free agency, but they were just going to replace it because it's the Cowboys. And for some reason, every offensive lineman they draft just works out magically. Hi, yes, Eagles fan. There's some trauma in that statement for sure. But it seems like it hasn't been that easy. What worries me is that theoretically their offensive line play should improve over the season. And if that's the case, they'll get better. Dak will have cleaner pockets. But a game like today, where you throw out that fourth quarter, oof. I don't have good adjectives for it. But his total stat line was 28 for 51. He did end up throwing through 379 yards, but it, again, wasn't efficient. The 2 touchdowns were at the end of the game. But speaking of that, let's flip this on this head. This is a Ravens team that needed a win. The Ravens, I just kept saying, are like the best 0-2 team I've seen in a long time. Because despite falling a little flat in dramatic fashion to the Raiders last week in week 2, they looked incredible versus the Chiefs. I don't understand what is wrong with this team and their ability to close out games in the end. So they won this one. But it's a pattern where they seem to be unable to hold leads, and it's a team that is better suited than any other team to hold a lead, with Lamar being able to run and Derrick Henry being their lead running back. This feels like a team that should be able to run out the clock at the end and just do that painful thing when you're on the opposing team and you're watching the other team march down the field for 9 minutes in the fourth and you're behind by a touchdown. And watching this game today, because this was I clicked away from Red Zone. This is the game I was watching. I wanted to watch the Cowboys lose, and I was stressed as they were coming back. It didn't feel like bad decision-making. I wish I could sit here and be like, yes, this, and this. That's what they need to fix. It feels like something that was just, born. Jeez. I'm watching Sunday Night Football right now, and Patrick Mahomes is annoyingly good at football. That is your summary of what I just watched there. If Atlanta wins, I win a family pool. I don't think that's going to happen. But if Buffalo wins on Monday, I still win it. So fingers crossed. Okay, no one cares. Nicole has her fantasy football team, and I have the pool I do with my family. Okay. So, in summary, this Ravens team is good. And if they could just figure out how to run the clock out at the end of games, they would be great. I don't understand their inability to do that. So, when I look at this game, I think the Ravens are great, and I trust that a Harbaugh-run team will figure that out. It must. And I look at the Cowboys, and I'm frustrated that the Cowboys got a resurgence of hope that they could figure it out at the end. But I don't think this final score represents what's going on, and I still leave with two major questions. One is, what is going on with the Cowboys, and why do they look like this? And what is going on with the Ravens, and why do they look like that only in the fourth quarter? Okay, the rest of the segment, I do the whole Broad Street versus Broadway thing, and I talk about the Phillies Mets. But first, here is my recorded reaction of the Phillies clinching the NL East tonight. So obviously disregard my stress about winning the NL East, but the rest of the segment, totally relevant. I'm worried about the Mets. But I'm smiling ear to ear right now because I just watched the Phillies win the division for the first time since I was 15. If Estevez is the closer in the postseason, he's going to give me, like, permanent heart palpitations.
1-1. It's fouled away. 1-2. In 2024, the 2-2. Swinging a fly ball, right center field. Castellanos going back on the edge of the track.
Yes! 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 Oh my gosh!
Celebrate as National League East champions. Bob each other on the mounds. One more time.
I was 15 years old. I believe I was a sophomore in high school the last time the Phillies won the division. I am now 28, a fully functioning adult with like a full-time job and have, definitely graduated high school and college. And I now pay all of my own bills, have my own apartment, all of these things. I can't believe how long it's been. I can't stop smiling. I'm so happy. Go Phils.
Broad Street versus Broadway. But is it really a debate? Because voiceover man is Team Broad Street, and that makes the vote 2-1 on this show. Let's go, birds.
Nicole is not here to either gloat or bring my sanity back, but this Phillies team, their inability to hit New York Mets pitching is infuriating. Zach Wheeler, Sunday night, threw such an incredible game. It was a gem of a game. It was a perfect Wheeler game. It was exactly what the Phillies needed, with clinching the division on the line. And no one could hit against the Mets pitching. It's baffling. I genuinely, I'm just sitting here going like, I know that the Phillies are going to end up clinching the division. It's the magic number is 1. It's going to happen. It's just, I'm now sitting here nervous that 1, they're not going to get that first round bye, which they should, but I'm nervous about it now because there's only 1 more week left of baseball. And then 2, if they have to play this Mets team in the postseason, I'm pretty sure this Mets team has the Phillies number. And it's not because they're doing some hitting masterclass. It's because they're pitching. Bryce Harper can't hit these Mets pitchers. I don't understand it. I'm in full transparency. It is currently Sunday night. I have just finished watching the game, so I'm a little emotional about it, and I know it's going to be okay. But I was really hoping, because Nicole wasn't feeling good. So I was going to get to come on here, and I was going to be an annoying, obnoxious Philadelphia fan with no New York fan to pull me back, and I was going to celebrate and pop some champagne because the Phillies are winning the division for the first time since, I think, 2011, and I was just going to be so excited. But no, they lost the 4-game series to the Mets 3-1, and because the Phillies couldn't hit, because Bryce Harper couldn't hit Mets pitching. They lost this game 2-1. 2-1. Your starting pitcher gets up 2 hits. You're overjoyed. That's great. That's a freaking great outing. He does, I believe it was 6.5 innings. Baseball's hard. This is really great analysis by me. This is just an emotional reaction about me being frustrated. I mean, I'm really stoked that they clinched the postseason. That's fun. But you know what would have been more fun is me being able to come onto this podcast and be really stoked that they also this week. It's okay. It's going to happen this week. But I'm genuinely nervous about the Phillies having to play the Mets in the postseason. There's a couple teams in the postseason I'm worried about. And you would think I'd be sitting here going, yeah, Dodgers and Brewers, right? Nope. I'm worried about the Mets and the Diamondbacks. That's what I'm worried about. That game it just made me feel defeated. Phillies were defeated and I feel defeated.
Nicole predicts a ball game. Nicole predicts the series. Give her almost no info and stats. We don't care if she doesn't know bat. Let us root for her predictions. If they don't win, it's a shame. For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out in our prediction game.
I'm going to shake off the Phillies depression. Let's talk about the final week of the regular season in baseball, which is crazy. I can't believe we're here already. I'm a little sad. I like baseball season, and I'm glad the NHL season is starting. But the NHL the Flyers play every 3 days. I love 9 out of every 10 days having a Phillies game to watch. Finish my work day, plop on the Phillies. It's just such a good, relaxing end of my day. And now we're going to be going to the postseason, which is not relaxing, fun, but not relaxing. And I'm going to miss baseball. Okay, so for the final week of the regular season, the first series of the week is the wild card duel, Mets at Atlanta. The day you get this episode is the first day of the Mets-Braves series. Now, because the Mets did so well against the Phillies this week, they currently have a 2-game lead going into this series against the Braves. And in shocking fashion, if we're looking at the wild card race, we also now have to look at the Diamondbacks, who are only 500 in their last 10 games and essentially have slid back. Or you could say that the Mets and Braves caught up, but either way, this is now a 3-team race, solidly. Even though before it looked like it was just the Mets, Braves, and the now eliminated Chicago Cubs for 1 spot, we seem to have 3 teams for 2 spots, and 2 of those teams are going head-to-head. So despite all the success the Mets just had, they have to win the series, because the Braves could swing it back the other way. Now, we don't have the full probable pitchers at the time of recording, but Sale hasn't pitched since Thursday, which means that he's definitely pitching one of these games. Sale, the assumed Cy Young winner who's going to steal it from Zach Wheeler, even though Zach Wheeler 100% deserves the Cy Young, but I guess Sale does too, but give it to Wheeler. Okay, not to make this about the Phillies, even though I make everything about the Phillies. The Mets are going to go up against Sale at least once. Despite all their injuries, they have had decent pitching performances. Now, I will say that Fried and Holmes just played Saturday and Sunday against the Marlins. So the Mets might be lucky and miss them, but they're not going to get lucky and miss Sale. And if the Braves can sneak out another win, this is going to all be on the line still for the finals, both of their final series at the end of the week. And neither of them have rollover teams for their final series of the week, but I will say the Braves have the Royals at home, but the Mets have to travel to division-winning Milwaukee Brewers. So I know the Mets want to wrap this up in Atlanta this week, but it seems like the Braves still have a little chance of squeaking it out. So it's going to be an interesting series. It somehow lined up perfectly that the likely first-round playoff matchup, San Diego Padres, Arizona Diamondbacks, are facing off for the final series of the season. Now, this is really interesting because Arizona has slid back, where they could actually end up losing their seeding to the Mets. Unlikely the Braves, but could be either. So the Arizona Diamondbacks have something to play for, which means they can't all just hide their secrets and rest their starters going into the playoff series where these two are going to have to play again. I'm going to be really interested to see what San Diego chooses to do and just how much Now, going into that series, which we don't know right now, how locked up things are going to be for San Diego. And same for Arizona. And if both their seedings locked up, this might not be that exciting of a series. But I don't think it's going to be the case. I think baseball's weird, and baseball tends to end up with excitement because baseball's weird. So I think both of these teams might have a little bit to play for. It's going to be interesting how many cards they hold close to their chest, how conservative are they with their pitchers going into the postseason, when we're likely to get 2 weeks of San Diego, Arizona, starting with this precursor to the first round matchup. The WNBA playoffs have started. Now, we haven't had a ton of opportunities on this show to talk about the WNBA, but they have had a record-breaking season, as they should, and I'm loving seeing all the attention it's getting. So with the playoffs starting, I thought if, maybe you haven't watched a ton of WNBA this season, and you want to jump in and pick a storyline and know what to root for, what to root against, what to look for, I have 3 major round 1 storylines for you. Storyline number 1. Can the New York Liberty win it all in year 2 of their super team formation? Now, they are the number 1 overall seed, so they technically are the favorites, but they should have been last year as well, considering all the headlines of the super team they are forming. Last year's MVP, and arguably still the second best player in the league, Breanna Stewart, looks incredible right now. 2021 MVP, Jones, has had stretches where she has also still looked like her MVP form self. And second-year player Sabrina took a big step in her development this year, really looking like she belongs in this league. And that is why this is the number 1 overall seed. They built this team. It was dubbed the super team. Despite dominating the head-to-head matchup with number 8 seed Atlanta in season, they did drop 2 of their last 3 regular season games, showing that they're not coming in with a ton of momentum. And overall, experts say that it's their defense that leaves a lot to be desired. So can an upset happen in round 1? It's possible, of course. But I would look more to round 2. But if you're looking for a team to root against because you're anti the concept of super teams, root against New York Liberty. But this might be a fun team to jump on and root for because there is fantastic talent and they're a fun team to watch. All right, you're probably shocked that this was not storyline number 1. But of course, storyline number 2 to follow is the Fever and Caitlin Clark have all of our attention, but can they truly upset the Sun in round 1? Now, this is more interesting than you might think at face value, considering how much coverage the Indiana Fever and Caitlin Clark received, and rightfully so. She has been incredible in her rookie season. But it did get off to a rough start. I believe they lost 9 of their first 10 games. It was rocky. And it didn't look like they had any hope of making the playoffs at all. But a second half season late surge propelled them into a playoff spot. Now, they're up against the Connecticut Sun, who won the regular season series 3-1, but notably, many of those games were earlier in the season. They played twice in that initial stretch I was talking about where Indiana just could not figure it out yet. And that made sense. Caitlin Clark was still a rookie. Even though she was putting up impressive numbers at the beginning, figuring out how to play a team game in a completely new league is going to take time to translate to wins. Normally, the points come first in basketball, and then the wins come afterwards. Now, I personally think I'll back the more experienced Sun team in this matchup, but I'm really excited to watch Caitlin Clark, after having an incredible rookie season, play in her first WNBA playoffs, and maybe she'll surprise us. I think they definitely squeak out a game, and it could come down to a really exciting Game 3 in round 1. Last but not least, storyline number 3. Will Vegas three-peat as NBA champions, but this time they're coming in as the 4 seed? No, there is no question that the Las Vegas Aces are one of the most talented teams in the league. But they've had some adversity this year, so they didn't smooth sail to the number 1 seed like they did last season. The beginning of the season was rough, being without Chelsea Gray. Now, they did have 4 players go win Olympic gold, and when they came out of the Olympic break, they stumbled a bit, going 2-4. And that could be a travel hangover, just like the break in momentum in the season. But since then, the Aces looked more like themselves. They went 9-1 in their past 10 games leading into the postseason, with their only loss in that stretch being to number 1 seed New York Liberty. I definitely wouldn't overlook this team despite their seeding, and it's going to be interesting to watch if they can three-peat. Reminder, WNBA playoffs are fast series. They don't go full 7 games like the NBA counterpart. So make sure when you're listening to this to check up when the games are for the teams you want to watch, because these series are going to go fast. And we'll definitely be talking about it next week. The NHL is back. And Nicole and I were going to play a game this week that was too niche or interesting, where we both shared stories with each other. I'm going to share stories with her about the Flyers, and she was going to share stories with me about the New York Islanders and we're going to deem each other's stories, is that niche or is that actually interesting content for someone who's not a crazy fan of that team? And that's going to be a really fun game. So I'm going to hold that because next week is still going to be training camp. So put a pause on that. And because Nicole's not here, I'm going to obsess over Matvei Michkov. I am an unbelievably excited Flyers fan right now. I have been thinking a lot this week about the concept of having a savior for the franchise. And there's been, if I look back at the teams I like, it's not that there haven't been, that's a savior of the franchise. Like, I'm a big Phillies fan. Bryce Harper signing with the Phillies changed the trajectory of this organization. He came in as a savior. He is MVP, top best players in the league, came into the team, was going to change everything. But I realized how interesting and different it is when it's drafting a player that you hype up as the savior. And I was trying to find other comparisons. So on the Eagles side, Carson Wentz was drafted number 2 overall, but he came from North Dakota State University. So there wasn't this necessarily he's definitely going to be the savior of the franchise energy. It was, all right, I guess let's trust the team that they did this analysis well. And up until that man broke and forgot how to play football, essentially he did get us to the playoffs and that number 1 seed that inevitably created this moment right here where the Eagles were able to win the Super Bowl. But there wasn't that hype coming into that first year because I don't think anyone believed it because there wasn't the pedigree there. It's definitely not the world that the Bears are living in right now, where they draft Caleb Williams, highly talented quarterback, number 1 overall, and it was like, he's going to save our franchise. It's not the the incomplete existence of the Jets, where they just keep drafting the savior of their franchise, Geno and Sam Darnold and Zach Wilson, and now they have a savior via free agency. But again, that is a different experience. So I thought long and hard back through my life as a sports fan, and I find it fascinating that this is the first time in my sports lifetime that I've experienced this drafting a highly touted prospect that's going to save your franchise kind of experience. It's always come through free agency for me. And it's been fun. It's been a lot of fun. And for a Flyers team, that the only difference between last year and this year is that there's more question marks at goalie and Michkov is added. I'm so glad they were able to get Michkov to come over because it's made this season interesting. At the point of recording, here's what has happened in Flyers land. There's been there's a rookie camp. There have been 2 rookie games against the other prospects for the Rangers. They've had 3 days of training camp, and they played 1 preseason game against the Washington Capitals. Okay? So I'm not trying to get out of hand here, but all I personally wanted is for Michkov to look like the best player in the rookie games, and then to look like he belonged out there in the first preseason game, and hopefully what the beat reporters would say, it looked like he belonged in the NHL as well. And that's really been what has been reported. In the first preseason game, he got 2 assists. He didn't score a goal yet, but it makes a lot of sense to me that his passing would translate first. It seems like the vision and the high hockey IQ that it's reported he had obviously would come with him. That would all transfer easily. And he just needs to figure out the rest of it. But most importantly, he looks like an NHL player. He looks like he belongs out there. This doesn't look like a 19-year-old kid that's like, damn, we rushed him out of juniors because we wanted to bring him over, which, by the way, Russian player wants to come over, you come over. They come over. Michkov wanted to come over, he's coming over. There's no saying no. There's no sending him down to the AHL, of course. But, he could also, and he could still struggle this entire season. And he's going to have ups and downs because he's young and he's developing and it's his rookie season. But it's nice to see that he looks like he belongs out there. The interesting thing is that the Flyers really have no organizational depth in center. So it's been the talk of the offseason is who's going to center Michkov. And it's been interesting to see that they are giving Morgan Frost the first chance. And if you're not a Flyers fan, Morgan Frost is one of those players where everyone's always trying to trade him because it's just like you think that he should be a top six center, but he kind of plays like a middle six to a bottom six center. And it just doesn't seem like the coach really likes him all that much. Now, it makes sense to start Michkov with Frost because Frost is a younger player, so theoretically they have the potential to play together for a long time. Morgan Frost seems to not be able to score a ton, but he makes beautiful plays. He's such a great playmaker at center. So if you put that with Michkov at right wing, seems like there's high potential there. That being said, I could have totally seen why they would have ended up putting him with Captain Coots. And to help Michkov by putting another high IQ hockey player on the ice with him. And I think Michkov is going to get a ton of time being centered by both of these players. But through all of training camp, he's been with Frost. They both played together on the same line in the first preseason game, and it looked good. It looked really good. What you hope when you bring in an all-star player like Michkov is that he raises the talent level around him. Everyone else all of a sudden looks better. And if Morgan Frost can look from a middle sixer to start playing with Michkov, and they bring that line up, and Frost starts looking like a top six center, this team gets astronomically better. All right, as baseball season sunsets into the distance and we lose daycare of the week, I'm going to start bringing you gritty shenanigans. I don't know how we lived in a world pre-gritty. What was the world like before gritty? Because it sounds so sad. Gritty brings joy, shenanigans, chaos, just overall happiness to our lives. So my gritty shenanigan of the week is the fact that he was just walking down the street in a suit. Just for fun. There was also some fun Twitter interactions off of it. But the most shocking thing to me is these people who are watching Gritty walk by and they're not panicking and freaking out and excited. You are walking by a celebrity, the man of the moment, and you're just ignoring it? You're ignoring the giant orange man walking down the street in a suit. You do you. I'd fangirl a little bit. And that is your gritty shenanigan of the week.
It's time for the final buzzer.
We didn't have a ton of time this week to talk all things college football, but I did want to mention that James Madison upset North Carolina 70-50. I don't think anyone played defense, but North Carolina played a little less defense. While the strategy went horribly, horribly wrong and Lewis Hamilton did not have a good race day at the Singapore GP, it is worth bringing up that he continued his streak of always qualifying in the top 5 at Singapore. I broke down some of the major stories going into the WNBA playoffs on the show this week, but here are some big numbers from their regular season. Attendance was up 47% versus last year. Viewership was up 170% on ESPN, which is huge. Guess what? You broadcast women's sports, people will watch. And as an interesting tidbit, ESPN's WNBA Countdown show actually averaged more viewers than the average game last season. The WNBA has officially announced one of 2 expansion locations. The first will be Portland, and they'll set to begin in the 2026 season. Now, there's lots of different options for the second expansion team, and I am here. Please, Philadelphia. Thank you. Please, 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 Philadelphia. Because the fact that Philadelphia doesn't have a ton of women's sports teams really hurts. And we love and support our sports teams a lot. So, Philadelphia, WNBA, pretty please. The Chicago White Sox are likely to go down as the worst team in baseball history, and if not the worst, definitely one of them. And it seems like their social media admin has had enough, but at least they're having fun coming up with unique ways to say that they lost. Shohei Ohtani made history being the first player to achieve a 50-50 season in MLB history. So that's 50 home runs and 50 steals. And in crazy hysterical fashion, all of those graphics went up across all social media channels congratulating him on that, and within 30 minutes he had a 51-51 season. Instantly outdated. The Baltimore Orioles figured out what Philadelphia Phillies fans already did, and they finally designated Craig Kimbrell for assignment. Someone in marketing needs a raise because the NHL Stadium Series that's happening in Ohio State's stadium this year is being called the Stadium Series. Good job. Sidney Crosby has signed a new contract, and wait, you might be able to guess it, but it was for $8.7 million average annual value. He signed 3 contracts since his entry-level contract expired in 2008. The first one was 5 years, $8.7 million cap hit. The next one was 12 years, $8.7 million cap hit. And this one, 2 years, $8.7 million cap hit. Now, good for you, that's cute and fun and all, but also, that's a lot of money to leave on the table, but also cute and fun. So, I don't know, let me know how you land on it. You might have missed it because it was a little niche, but Scott Lawton and Gritty did a photo shoot together. One of those old-fashioned TJ Maxx photo shoots. It was great content. Well, they turned that photo shoot into a t-shirt, and if you buy it, all the proceeds are going to charity, specifically an animal rescue charity in Philadelphia. So if you think the shirt is funny, definitely check it out and give it a purchase.
Thank you for listening to another sports show. Thank you to our co-creators, Nicole Katz and Brianna Klein. Thank you to the four-legged executive producers and me, VoiceOver Man. Make us one of your stars of the game by subscribing, liking the video, and turning on auto downloads. Make our day by leaving us a review on your podcast platform of choice and a comment on YouTube. Attend the postgame on social media for exclusive daily content. We'll be back to review the playbook every week. See you next Tuesday.
Today's Another Sports Show is wrapping up so she can go watch the end of this Kansas City Atlanta game.